Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning with our next session on e-governance for good governance and inclusive growth. For this, I would like to request the session chair, Mr. Ravi Saxena, Additional Chief Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, Government of Gujarat, to please come on the dais. Mr. Ravi Saxena, please. Prior to joining the Department of Science and Technology, Government of Gujarat, as Additional Chief Secretary 3 years ago, Mr. Saxena has served as Principal Secretary to the Gujarat Government at the Department of Health, Medical Sciences, Medical Education and Family Welfare, and as well as Development Commissioner, Ministry of Commerce, Government of India at Kandla Special Economic Zone. We also have with us the co-chair, Mr. Arvind Sitaram, President, Inclusive Growth of Cisco. Mr. Arvind Sitaram, please. Arvind Sitaram is a computer scientist with over 27 years of work experience. After pioneering work in several startup and high-tech companies, he became one of the leading inventors in Cisco systems with 57 patents. He served on the board of studies of Anna University and has led and been part of several international standard bodies. We also have with us Mr. Bipul Pathak, Secretary IT Jammu and Kashmir. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please have some silence in the hall? We are having a session. I would request all of you to kindly maintain the decorum of the hall. Talking about Mr. Bipul Pathak, a 1998-1992 batch IAS officer with 20 years of experience working in state and central governments of various capacities. He currently holds the position of Commissioner's Secretary in Government of Jammu and Kashmir. A mechanical engineer, he also holds an MBA degree from HEC Paris. He has served in field-level leadership positions at the start of his career with distinction. He has also worked in Government of India and as Director of Finance in Social Sector and later as Director Foreign Investment in Media Sector. A huge round of applause for Mr. Bipul Pathak, please. I welcome Mr. Joan McCullough, Distinguished Fellow, Cisco Systems. I'm sorry, Ms. Joan McCullough, Distinguished Fellow, Cisco Systems. Joan is a Director and Distinguished Fellow with the Global Public Sector Team, Internet Business Solution Group, Cisco Systems. This team provides strategic advice to public sector organizations around the world that are interested in how ICT-enabled transformation can help them to achieve their program objectives and priorities. Amongst other projects, since joining IBSG, Joan has been providing advice to the Government of India on the implementation of its National E-Governance Plan. देवियों और सज्जनों, आपसे अनुरोध है कि कृपया शांति बनाए रखें इस कक्ष में। हम अब नया सेशन शुरू करने जा रहे हैं और कार्यक्रम कक्ष में कृपया शांति बनाए रखें। धन्यवाद। So I welcome all the panelists and the session chair as well as the co-chair of the
It's okay. I think, yeah, thank you. Good morning. But may I request everybody to kindly get settled. We see a lot of people moving around. They'll be distracting the attention and the concentration of the people here on the panel.
Hold the mic further down. Further down.
Is it working? Not working?
It's working. You want it so that hold it over here so that you're not covering the steps.
Hello?
Hold it lid down. There you go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have with us Mr. Arvind Sitaraman, President of the Inclusive Growth Sector in Cisco. He's been introduced by the Master of the Ceremonies, Ms. Joan McCullough, Director and Distinguished Fellow, Internet Business Solutions Group, Cisco Systems, and she brings with her the experiences of the e-governance in Canada. We have Major General Dr. R. Sivakumar, who's heading Natural Resources Data Management System and is also the architect of National Special Data Infrastructure being launched by the Government of India. We have Mr. Bipul Pathak. He is Secretary, Information Technology, Government of Jammu and Kashmir. Friends, what we are discussing today in this session is about good governance and inclusive growth. What is good governance? Generally, good governance obliges the state to perform its functions in a manner that promotes the values of efficiency, non-corruptibility, responsiveness to civil society, and therefore it becomes a principle that is largely associated with the statecraft. And what are the essential parameters of good governance? What is good governance all about? Good governance, some of the parameters that I could identify: ensuring inclusive growth, leadership, legal infrastructure, absence of bad governance, security, transparency, ability to deal with crisis, education, effective execution, accountability, access to beneficiaries, setting up the priorities, and this is basically a conclusion culled out from our own experiences of governance in my state, that the state of Gujarat, where for last 10 years there is a new paradigm that has been experimented, has reached a level where conclusions can be drawn, has come to a level where it has been appreciated by people not only in this country but many other countries. And it is around these parameters that we can have discussions during this 1.5 hour that we have to follow. And I think I'll request Mr. Arvind Sitaraman to begin with his presentation on the experiments that he is making as the President of Inclusive Growth in Cisco. Mr. Arvind Sitaraman.
Thank you. Thank you. Could the organizers please get them to keep quiet, otherwise it's impossible to have any conversation. I think you need to have two people go there and have them move out, otherwise it's not going to work. Is my presentation up? I can't see it. Is my presentation up? This one, yes. Yeah. Got it. You know what? I think you should go and keep quiet. Yeah? Otherwise, it doesn't work. Okay, so no problem. Okay. It's getting quieter. Okay. It's kind of crazy to talk about inclusive growth in India, because I don't know how many of you know, for the last 2,000 years of Western documented history, India was the most prosperous nation for 1,500 years. For another 300 years, we were the second most prosperous nation. And I don't know how many of you know that when we got independence in 1947, 1 rupee was equal to $3 US dollars. And now we know what 1 rupee is worth. Question is, what happened? That's a long history lesson, but let's look at where do we want to go going forward from now. So the vision that we are talking about is, how do you bring inclusive growth, not just to catch up to the developed nations. You're looking at how do you bring inclusive growth so that you can leapfrog into the future. 10 years ago, India had the worst teledensity in the world. Today, we have one of the best in the world. How did that happen? Infusion of a simple technology called mobile phones, and immediately all this changed. The question is, what else can we do to convert this nation into a knowledge economy that is not held in the hands of a few, but it can be federated and it's available ubiquitously. So many people in the world see the opportunity that we have, and many have said that India will be a powerhouse, economic powerhouse, and so on and so forth. And there are predictions that India will outpace China from a growth perspective. However, we do have major challenges as well. The growth has not been as steady as we had hoped, and there are some structural fundamental challenges that we have in India. Three areas that I want to focus on. I don't want to go through, I think Mr. Saxena did list out a whole lot of areas that we need to look at, but I won't go through the whole thing. I would focus on three essential groups of activities that we feel are fundamental to have India leapfrog into the future. One is skills development. Second is healthcare. Third is education at the grassroots level. So before we get into this huge question of what are these things, let's look at inclusive growth from a broad architectural perspective. So what you see before you is an architectural diagram that talks about a village. A village does not have to be a traditional village. It can be a 4th or a 5th level city. It could be an urban ghetto or a slum. In fact, it is any place where you don't have these essential 4 services. You don't have proper education, you don't have proper healthcare, you don't have a marketplace or skills development, and you don't have public services. If you don't have those places, that is a village. Question is, how do we enable that village so that it can become part of the national economy or even the global economy? We think there are 4 things that we need to do. We need to build strong partnerships with the government, with service providers, universities, NGOs, associations, industry associations. We also need to build human capital. Most architectures or most people who talk about inclusive growth, what they do is they talk about how do you sell people toothpaste, how do you sell them shampoos, how do you give them microcredit. We think that's the wrong way of looking at it. We believe the way we should be looking at it is how do we put money back in the rural systems. If you take money out of the rural systems by selling them more and more, you're essentially going to make those areas even poorer. So we need to look at how do you build the human capital over there and how do you make things more affordable and more prosperous in those areas. The third thing that you're looking at is affordable. I just noticed that you can't read it because it's white on white. I'm sorry about that. It's affordable business models. Affordable business models does not mean cheap. It means that you have to deliver technology or deliver these services in a manner that people can absorb, people can consume. And fourthly, the more important thing is how do you deliver them out of a cloud? Cloud technology will actually make delivery of these services very inexpensive, and it takes away the complexity from the rural areas and puts them in an area where you can get expert assistance. So with this architecture in mind, let's look at the issue of skills and labor mismatch. So by 2030, it is predicted that India will have almost half a billion unemployed youth. When people join the labor market or job market every year, only 8 million find jobs. So this is going to build up over a period of time and it's going to get worse. Only about 10% of the people have any college degrees. And even amongst them, 75% of those who get engineering degrees, and 85% who get non-engineering or non-professional degrees are not employable. Does not mean that people are stupid. People are actually very, very smart. The problem is we have an education system where there's a huge mismatch in terms of capabilities and abilities to finesse or close the individual so they can hit the job market running. And so we are going to show you some examples of how this can be done. What we've done is in Kerala, we have a special purpose commercial network that specializes on skills development. We have connected up 34 ITIs and we provide them education remotely. Because why? master trainers are hard to find. And even if you get master trainers, getting them to go from one place to the other will take a long time, and you're essentially wasting the time traveling and you're spending less time training. So essentially what we've done is we used our technology. I'll show you a video in the next slide on how this is done. We're not only talking about classroom kind of an environment, this can also be done in a workshop environment as well. Other thing that we are going to do is we are going to be launching an auxiliary nursing network in Bihar. So this is going to be used to train auxiliary nurses in Bihar. And again, the expert trainers to train nurses is in short supply, equipment is in short supply, and people are all over the place. So question is, how do you train them remotely? In Karnataka, we worked with the government of Karnataka to train unemployed youth and in hospitality and in accounting. Good news is that all the people who got trained got jobs, and they were all done remotely. And otherwise they would have never been able to get these jobs. We are also now working with some NGOs to provide remote training, technical training for orphans. We are working with the Indian Army to train soldiers leaving the Army. There are 50,000 soldiers who leave the Army every year and 50,000 new cadets who join the Army every year. So we are working with them as well to train them to resettle as well as train them to onboard on technology. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides, or rather videos, very short videos, to show you how this technology works. Can you hear? Yes?
Hello Jabalpur, can you hear me? Hi, good morning. I'm Dakshesh Patwa here from Cisco. Today I'm going to talk about TCP/IP model.
Good afternoon. I hope you're doing good. How is your day so far?
नमस्ते, मैं लक्ष्मी हूँ सिस्को से. आज मैं स्विचिंग के बारे में बताने वाली हूँ.
So your TCP/IP model is also a different kind of model for the networking.
BGP model plus UDP model, both are logically या TCP physically?
Yes, आपका क्वेश्चन बहुत अच्छा है.
Today we will start this session for the trunk port versus access port. That is one session, and the second session is BTP. I assume that by now you would be familiar with trunking concept, VLAN concept. Is there any question?
Before people in 26 is separate. That is now I have some confusion.
So what you see is that the
knowledge we are gaining will definitely help us for resettlement after we are retiring from army.
So what you saw is, these were engineers. So this is the pilot that we did with the Army. So engineers in Cisco, Bangalore, who actually develop the products, develop the technology, and who actually implement the technologies, volunteered that time to teach people in the Army who were leaving the Army about networking. So they got into 2 months of training, 1 month of basic computers that partner delivered, and another month of training from Cisco experts to the Army. Very interactive. The site was in Jabalpur. The training was from Bangalore. So let's look at one other video.
India is soon going to be the youngest nation on earth, with more than half its population being youth. But it is also true that the growing gap between employment and employability will leave about 550 million unemployed youth in the country.
Village students and city students have a lot of difference there. So we inferiority complex.
Now there is a definite disconnect between education and employment. There is no dearth of employment, but employability can be enhanced through skill development.
A revolutionary solution that has been implemented between Bangalore and Hoskote is generating much excitement and hope among students and the industry alike. This solution is aided by technology provided by Cisco, a global giant in networking and connectivity. It uses the power of video, audio, and networking to achieve the impossible. To the vast resource-hungry rural India, it provides direct access to the latest and the best. This truly creates more opportunities and a level playing field.
Hi, I'm Radhika Rao. I do training for Cisco, which is a virtual training for students from Hoskote. The topics that are being covered are hospitality, personality development, and spoken English, with a little bit of communication and etiquettes. Hi, good morning. Shall we start? Ivattu, now generally, cleaning of public areas.
So if you notice, the language is Kannada.
First aid
It's language
and
independent.
practicing for first aid nodoಣ. Alright? Cleaning of public areas ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು? Normal ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಹೇಗೆ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತೀವೋ ಆ ತರನೇ ಇರಿ. So please answer. Of course, yes, kitchen. Kitchen clean ಮಾಡಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹೋಟೆಲ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರಾದ್ರೂ ಊಟ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರಾ? So all this, if you don't do proper cleaning, ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ?
ಹಾಸ್ಪಿಟಾಲಿಟಿ ಕೋರ್ಸ್ ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಅದರಿಂದ ಎಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತದೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಿದೆ. ಇದರಿಂದ ನಾನು ಹೋಟೆಲ್ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜರ್ ಆಗ್ತೀನಿ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೂ ಡೌಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲ.
We have students attending these classes regularly. They come attend the sessions in the morning and then they attend their regular college sessions. And we also understand from the trainers that the kids are doing really good. They are very keen on learning new things. They are improving in their spoken English and the tally packages. So they are very keen on learning these new things.
I think there is no difference between a classroom training and a virtual classroom training. So the impact of the training program is 100% relevant to the industry standards.
I am very happy that organization like Cisco has understood the ground reality, and with their expertise and the technological provider at the global level, they have rightly understood that the intervention of Cisco can provide the best qualitative training.
So that is...
if you were to create...
Let me see. So we talked about two classroom kind of training models, right? So now what we are going to, unfortunately I don't have the video for it because I couldn't get the video in time. What we are now going to show a couple of photographs is about how do you train people to fix a motor. Okay, so imagine most of the time what happens is when you're teaching somebody about lathes, there'll be 2-3 rows of people, students who will be standing around a lathe, and only the first row would get to see anything. The rest of the guys would not get to see anything at all. So what we have done is through technology now, you can now bring in multiple ITIs, people from everywhere, who can then look at the kind of training that you would get as if you were doing it yourself. So you see the trainer there, and there are about 4 other centers which have joined, looking at how do you put together or service an engine. So on the healthcare side, there are big issues. People have to typically travel the entire day to go somewhere to talk to a doctor and get something like a crocin. What we have done is we have connected up the primary healthcare center to the district healthcare centers and to a tertiary center, super specialty hospital as well. So the villagers at the village level could get super specialty and specialty care. So let's go. Over the last 11 months now in India, there have been more than 60 pilots that have been launched. Almost none of them are active and surviving. When we launched this pilot about 11 months ago, since then, we have had 22,000 specialty and super specialty consultations. Specifically, 50% of the people who attend are women and children, 2 groups who do not get these kinds of care. As I said, so I'm going to show you a very quick video that talks about how this is done.
There's definitely a shortage of doctors and shortage of specialists in India. so many diseases getting neglected, underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed and not diagnosed.
ಈಗ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ರಾಯಚೂರಿಗೆ ಸಿಟಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಬೇಕು. ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ 30 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಸಿಟಿ. ಪೂರ್ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಮನಿ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಅವರಿಗೆ ದೂರ ಹೋಗಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ತೊಂದರೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ.
ರಿಚ್ಗೆ ಜಾನ ಪಡ್ತಾ ऐसी दो बहुत दूर होता तकलीफ होता.
What you're going to see is a video of a video.
ಏನ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ಸ್?
ಹುಟ್ಟಿದಾಗಿಂದನೇ ಮೆಂಟಲ್ ರಿಟಾರ್ಡೇಷನ್ ತರ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಹುಡುಗ. ಹುಟ್ಟಿದಾಗಿಂದನೇ ಏನು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಸರಿಯಾಗಿ ಊಟ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬರಲ್ಲ ಅಂತೆ. ತನ್ನ ಕೈಯಿಂದ ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬರಲ್ಲ. ಹೇಳಿದೆಲ್ಲ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ.
ಓಕೆ, ಕೈಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆಟ ಆಡಕ್ಕಾಗುತ್ತಾ?
ಒಂದ್ ಕೈ ಮಾತ್ರ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಮೇಡಮ್.
ಮೆದುಳಿಂದ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅದನ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಬರ್ಸ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಫಿಸಿಯೋಥೆರಪಿ ಅರೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು.
We're providing medical services to the periphery of the country and technology is the answer. We find the Cisco platform to...
Sorry, if you, I just paused it for a second. So if you notice, there is a nurse on the other end and she didn't know where to place the stethoscope. The doctor on the other hand is telling her where to keep it so that she can hear actually the heartbeat and sounds.
Be extremely robust and versatile for the delivery of such high-end telemedicine services as we hope to provide.
Every session we spend like 2 hours.
This type of systems which are manufactured by the Cisco people, definitely it will be a boon to the people and it will add more on healthcare system in our backward district. It is a real surprise to the people sitting at the village level. They can have an assessment of their health system from the super specialty hospitals and it will be an add-on thing to the government agency.
So again, what we do is the medium is this. You have video as a primary mechanism of interchange between people. It's not audio anymore. People want to see doctors. People want the doctors to see them. People want the doctors to touch them and smell them and all that. So those are 2 areas that we can't still have people touch somebody remotely. But you can still have all the things that the doctors would do remotely that they would do if they were in that particular room. Third area that I want to briefly touch on is education. So in India, you have 1 teacher for 40 students, according to government statistics. But the real number is probably close to 80 because para-teachers and assistants and everybody is included as a teacher. 29% of our schools have single teachers there. The same teacher teaches across grades, teaches across subjects. Then how can we make each village or each child part of a knowledge network or a knowledge nation? We can't. So we need to look at it something different. And India alone has about the Indian subcontinent has about 500 million children. So the complexity of the numbers and the data and the distances that we have to be dealt with. So what did we do? So I'm going to show you a video on how we have solved this problem. We have an MOU with the government of Karnataka where we are present in 3 districts and we deal with 9 schools and 2 hostels. These are hostels that are 4 hostels. These are hostels for SC/ST children and for minority children. With the regular school, we provide them supplementary education over and above what they get in class. This supplements areas that they haven't understood. With the hostels, what we do is we do intervention education where we actually give them like tuition classes remotely. What we can say is that over the last 1 year that we have done, the grades of these kids have gone up, absenteeism has dropped, there's almost no dropout from schools. Kids who have actually left schools have rejoined and they're very, very excited. So let me show you a very quick video on what the solution looks like.
On a bright Monday morning, students and teachers are getting ready for another day. Children line up in the classroom as teachers prepare their subjects and ready themselves to answer queries. Through this interface, teachers reach out to hundreds of students at the same time.
So what you see here, sorry, I've got to pause again. You see different classes over here and there'll be a better video that will show up. Each class shows up as a tile. The teacher can go select any tile and they would see a larger view of the class, like you saw in the picture there. Teacher can show any content here. It could be video, it could be a picture, it could be a PowerPoint, Word, whatever document that you have, and she could show it there, and it's very, very interactive.
Students become part of a larger community.
Imagine if you can open this up where you bring in 3 other classes.
ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಸೌಂದರ್ಯ. ನಾನು 8ನೇ ತರಗತಿ ಓದುತ್ತಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಊರಿನ ಹೆಸರು ಎಲೆಬಿಚ್ಚಲಿ. ಕಂಪ್ಯೂಟರ್ ಬಂದರೆ ನನಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಇಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ. ನಾನು ವಾರದಲ್ಲಿ 3 ದಿನ ಕಂಪ್ಯೂಟರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಕಂಪ್ಯೂಟರ್ ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್, ಗಣಿತ, ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ, ಸಮಾಜ ಕಲಿತಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ನಾನು ದೊಡ್ಡವಳಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಟೀಚರ್ ಅಥವಾ ಇಂಜಿನಿಯರ್.
ನಿಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಸಿಸ್ಕೋ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಒಂದು ಮಾರ್ಗದರ್ಶನದಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಕೋಚಿಂಗ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟ ನಂತರ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಸುಧಾರಿಸಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿಕೊಳ್ಳಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಇಚ್ಛೆ ಪಡ್ತೀನಿ.
Cisco technology has certainly induced the children to take interest in learning. The teachers who are observing this process, they can improve their skills. If we extended this system, this Cisco technology to other school children will definitely take interest.
So one of the things that we've done is using the same network, we've also trained about 300 teachers across all the districts that we are in. The interesting thing is, not a single teacher was absent for the entire course. Normally what happens is people come in there, they sign and they don't show up the next day. Not a single teacher was absent. In fact, every feedback that we got was this is the best training they've had in their career. So I want to leave you with this view. Several UN studies and several studies have said that network is the enabler for how countries need to leap forward and grow their economies. Definitely, skills development, education and healthcare are 3 pivots that are most crucial, not to mention that there are other things as well. One of the areas that we did not talk about that was in the architecture is public services. Public services can be delivered out of the network. Unfortunately, there is no sustainable business model for it. So I'll leave it with that thought and then we'll go take up other discussions in the panel. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? So thank you, Arvind. I think that was a brilliant presentation on how technology has been deployed by Cisco in transferring knowledge, improving skills, creating better access of the services from the government and other organizations for improving the overall standards of life for the people who have remained underserved. And this is one of the dimensions which certainly points in the direction of good governance and how governments can deploy technologies and create better access. May I now request Madam Joan McCullough, who has long innings of her experiences in the area of e-governance in Canada, to let us have her impressions on the subject of good governance and inclusive growth.
Okay, thank you very much. What I wanted to do is talk about what we've done in Canada to address primarily inclusiveness. And I was, just so you know where I'm coming from, I'm from the province of Ontario, Canada, and I was the director responsible for the digital economy strategy for the province for many years before I joined Cisco, and then I was responsible for Ontario's e-governance strategy. So we had a 4-stream approach. We worked in 4 areas simultaneously to address these topics in the 1990s. First of all, the primary government role was to address market gaps in both supply and demand. So the government did not want to play an ongoing role in providing telecommunications or broadband infrastructure, but what it did do is develop several temporary programs to address the market gap between what the market was willing to pay and what the industry was willing to support in terms of putting broadband out across the province. The second area that we worked was in the demand side. And similarly, when demand wasn't yet there because there was no broadband in place, so communities couldn't develop applications that would use broadband, how could the government stimulate demand? So that was the second area. The third area was to provide direct support to industry to fill some content gaps, and I'll come back with some examples of each of these. And the fourth area was in the area of the government itself, how the government itself could be a better user of technology, therefore showing leadership to others in terms of how technology can be used to transform operations, but also when the government is using technology that built up demand and helped address the first two areas that I mentioned, both the supply gap as well as the demand gap. So those are the four streams of activities that we worked on, and several ministries cooperated together on this strategy, primarily the Ministries of Economic Development, Ministries of Education, Ministries of Health, Ministries of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, and the Ministry of Government Services, which also had the Information Technology Department. It was extremely important that all those ministries come together to cooperate on this overall strategy. So now just a few examples. So on the supply side of the infrastructure, we developed a program called the Ontario Network Infrastructure Program, which provided a subsidy to companies that came forward and said, we'd love to serve this area, but there isn't enough demand there, we can't afford to do it at this time. And based on a competitive analysis across competing companies, who was best positioned to do it, requirement of open standards, equal access, and some of those basic considerations, companies were awarded money to put in infrastructure for a period of 3 years in areas that the industry hadn't yet gone. And in the Ontario context, in the Canadian context, that was primarily remote rural areas as well as the distant north. So that's where subsidy was required for a period of 3 years. Those programs no longer exist. They did their job. They existed in the 90s and the early part of this millennium. They are no longer required. On the demand side, it was a similar approach. In this case, it was really important that communities came together and talk about how they would use technology if they had it. So it didn't matter where the leadership came from. It could have come from the school, the library, the community center, or some other source of leadership in the community. They were encouraged to come forward and seek funding for a period of 3 years to allow them to purchase technology services. So what they did is they came forward to the government with an application that said, this is how we would use technology if we had it. So that was addressing the demand pull side. In addition, the government directly supported demand pull in the area of education by making sure that every single school was connected, and that was achieved back in the 1990s, to ensure that there was content to deliver to the schools, and in some cases to deliver health services. The health environment in Canada is very different than that in India. It is a government funded across the board. So where one example of a health application was in the far north, patients were routinely being flown to the south to hospitals for assessment, diagnosis, and treatment. And we were able to make a business case very, very easily to put broadband to the north so that patients could stay in their communities for those purposes rather than being flown all over the province by air ambulance. So that was an example of direct government intervention. And finally, the fourth area was the government itself as a user of technology. And in that area, what we did is we took an enterprise-wide approach across the whole government to develop a common infrastructure that would be used by all departments, network, data centers, servers, desktops, help desk, and all the other IT services are provided from one place across all of government. And in so doing, it's aggregating demand and making the case to put infrastructure to all those parts of the province where the government has operations, which is virtually every community. So that helps support the business case for industry to expand and use technology. And Ontario has become a leader in e-governance, and in terms of, most of its applications are now available electronically. And it's now turning its mind, as is India, towards more open data, open governance, inclusive participation in terms of the government environment. So just in a nutshell, supply push, demand pull, and using the government itself as a leader.
So that was very interesting indeed to see how Ontario government moved on the track of e-governance. For the sake of comparative analysis, if we look at the e-governance model of India, we don't really have a business model or a revenue model. It is largely funded by the government of India. National e-governance program, when it was launched, it was certainly one of the most brilliantly conceptualized program to develop access of a very large cross-section of people, 1.2 billion people, for the services to be delivered from the governments. As a result, state-wide area networks have been established in every state. As a matter of fact, as of today, more than 15 states have already completed the state-wide area networks. There are state data centers which are planned in each of the 30 states, and almost 16 states have already commissioned state data centers. And as these have been done, there is a little, of course, revenue model. There's a small revenue model built around what we call the outlets, the community service centers, where a bidding was carried out for village-level entrepreneurs who are all sitting here, and some of whom have been honored this morning. So the bidding was to be carried out by companies for using the network available largely from the BSNL or any other service provider, and develop a model of delivery of services. Content, the National E-Governance Program funds the development of applications, and there are, for that purpose, mission mode projects which have been developed for the central government, for the state governments, and a large number of mission mode projects have been successfully already completed. As a matter of fact, 3 days back I was in Delhi, where secretaries of all the states of India had assembled to take a reckoning of how and where have we reached. And we figured out that the number of transactions taking place, which is the proof of pudding, have come to a very respectable number. As for the state I come from, and where the model of e-governance was initiated long before the National E-Governance Program was launched, we certainly we led it by almost 10 years, because we created our own state-wide area network in the year 2001, 10 years before the other states thought of. So naturally it has gone through learning curve, which is much more matured. 3 upgradations already. We connect 5,000 offices, 5,000 offices, 50,000 nodes on our statewide area network itself. The connectivity between state center to districts is 34 Mbps provided by the government. Between districts and sub-districts, 10 Mbps. But another initiative that we have made was in the year 2004, where we decided to connect 14,000 villages also on an intranet, and we found that while service providers' bandwidth was not available, we created a network through VSATs. So we have 14,000 VSATs. The bandwidth is pumped in by the service provider's hub at Bangalore, and which is now running. We have taken a pipe of 13 Mbps out of this for running 35 pairs of video conferences across the villages, which is used extensively for grievance redressal through a program which has been awarded by national and international agencies. It is called eSwagat. So there are large number of applications which are running, and the question of delivery of services and making it an inclusive society has now come to a level where deeper granularity is required to be analyzed, and where what one comes across is the issue of devices and the networks and the applications all becoming affordable, extensive, for carrying out this transformation where the knowledge base of the people who have remained underserved becomes a question. And as Arvind showed in his presentation, the efforts made by organizations like Cisco are commendable in this area. So it's basically a challenge which boils down to converting the underserved into a knowledge society, because the gap which is getting caused due to this ICT revolution is very scary. As a matter of fact, my own observation is that the gap that ICT revolution is causing perhaps is going to be more scary than what the industrial revolution did. It's the knowledge which I and your children carry right from the age of 4 years and 5 years, and the gap which keeps on getting created in an accelerated manner, in an increasing manner, between a child coming from a family who has had no exposure to internet and a child who comes from the family of one where he gets to sit on an internet device from the age of 3 years is so huge that unless we bridge this divide, and it is the challenge before all of us who are engaged in this business, that we bridge this divide, and that is where I suppose good governance comes into question, and that is where I think good governance, the issues of good governance would boil down to. Bring it to level where governance leads to empowerment of society underserved in terms of knowledge. And on that point, I'll request Major General Sivakumar, who heads NSDI, National Spatial Data Infrastructure in the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, to bring forth his observations on this subject.
Thank you, sir. In my opinion, inclusive growth and good governance should ultimately lead to empowerment of our people. That's what the chairman made a point. I would like to talk one of the technologies which from the Government of India, Department of Science and Technology, we have been pursuing is the geospatial technologies, which generally known to all of us as the GPS, GIS, and the remote sensing. After our 73rd and 74th amendments, we started working on creating a district-level spatial data centers. And I just now came to know that our chairman successfully implemented one of the districts in Gujarat long time ago. While we were doing this, we found that there are a large number of impediments in making or harnessing these data sets. We have a very rich data collection in this country, more so for the spatial data. Specifically, to talk about is my own department is the Survey of India, which is 245 years old, to a number of other departments which are producing large amount of spatial data. But somehow we were not able to, even today we are not able to fully exploit those data sets. One of the reasons we found is not having a metadata. So the metadata, in the absence of a metadata, there is a lot of duplication, and within the organization themselves, there is a wastage of efforts. And if we somehow find out or discover some data sets, you won't be able to use them together if data is coming from two different sources or two different agencies within the same organization. That is an important aspect here is interoperability. That is mostly due to various practices which we have been following earlier, and also various formats in the computer domain, and the basic structure of the data or the resolution of the data. Above all, the governments themselves is responsible for we are not being able to exploit the data is the policy environment. I do remember, and our chairman will certainly recall, the very serious case of one in Gujarat where for usage of maps, a lot of officers had to go through a turmoil. And most important aspect in this is the basic human mindset of not to share what they have, whether it is data of an individual or even organizationally. That's how Government of India brought in the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, wherein we are today providing a standardized metadata which will enable people to discover the data, developed a large number of technologies and the tools to enable data to be combined, integrated and analyzed. Also, Government of India brought in the remarkable changes in the policy. One of the important policies of National Map Policy of 2005, which permits map data of entire country available because there is a separate series of maps for the open domain called Open Series Maps and one for the defense series. And also in the remote sensing data policy of 2011, which provides even data up to 1 meter resolution is easily accessible, and today it is being streamed through the NRSC portal called Bhuvan. You know, after trying to establish a national spatial data infrastructure, which is basically an enabling infrastructure, we did find that there is a need to go beyond the national level. That's why during the 12th plan, we are trying to launch a state spatial data infrastructure. Already a number of states have taken lead and they have commenced their activities, but as a centrally sponsored scheme, we will be coming out with the state spatial data infrastructure after the 12th plan is formally approved. There had been a discussion about this demand pull and supply push. We did find all these days we are only being looking at the supply side. There is nothing much is being done with regard to the spatial data as far as the demand pull. That's how, in another concept now which has been approved at the initiative of the Planning Commission is the National GIS, National Geospatial Information System, which will be able to provide not the data, not the any other environment, but the trying to provide the solutions for people who would like to find a solution for their own problem at hand. The National GIS is a huge project which is going to be executed in a mission mode during the 12th plan at a total expenditure of about 3,000 crores. Now finally, I would like to add another term into the vocabulary of e-governance. I would like to say that we do feel from the geospatial guys, it is geospatial governance because most of the human activity is related to a location. So the governance has to be location based. So the e-governance should finally get translated to the G-governance, and we are trying to use the maps, and from there we are trying to migrate from those maps to the apps which all our people are using today, which should provide a G-governance and finally empower our people. Thank you.
Shivakumar. As a matter of fact, on that note, in Gujarat, we have gone a long way creating geospatial database, and Bhaskaracharya Institute of Space Applications in Geoinformatics has been recognized as a leading institution, and have been consulting Government of India agencies like Planning Commission also on some of these things. And Gujarat State Spatial Data Infrastructure, we call it GSSDI because GSDI is referring to Global Spatial Data Infrastructure, and since Gujarat has G in it, so we decided to add one more S to distinguish it from the Global Spatial Data Infrastructure, which is already in place. But this boils down to a very fundamental point on the supply side of the gamut of e-governance, and this is about open data. Nowadays, open data, open government is being discussed across the globe, and yet the governments, after governments, are so possessive about, and departments are so possessive about their data. And the success that Gujarat has been able to achieve in the area of developing a geospatial data infrastructure is quintessentially this, the collaboration of different departments to create one common geospatial database. Today you have hundreds of layers of data that we have today on the same geospatial base, which was first created by joining the field maps of all villages of Gujarat and adjusting them on the ground to make sure that they all are in tandem with each other. We were able to set up the entire state of Gujarat in terms of a grid which is perfectly accurate and matches with the actual ground realities on a square meter to square meter basis. Now, having created that particular database, we could build up layers of information, and today the way we are moving ahead is different from mission mode projects. In fact, I have been telling the government of India that NEGP should now be called NEGP 1, and it is high time we move to NEGP 2. NEGP 1 is not going to fulfill the ambitions of the people in this country. NEGP 1 does not envisage an integrated government at the federal level. NEGP 1 in Gujarat, way back, when we set up the state wide area network, we also created an application which is called Integrated Workflow and Document Management System. This IWDMS connects the entire government, and any paper which gets into the government moves seamlessly along with the file on it across the departments. Today, the budget exercise has started, and the entire budget of government of Gujarat would be developed absolutely without even a single paper being used, because we have this backbone called Integrated Workflow and Document Management System. Government of India has not yet conceptualized any such integration of workflow or document flow or document management across departments. They have begun with mission mode projects, which are like Ministry of Company Affairs, Passport, Railways, Income Tax. Wherever there was an interface with the common man, they created an application to make sure that the delivery is made to the common man. Very well. It worked very well for the time, but it has raised expectations. People want cross-departmental consultation also to be done as efficiently. And one of the key issues of good governance is efficient government. Efficient government, transparent government, which is not possible with the current model of NEGP. The model has to be now evolved to NEGP 2, where all these state data centers and state wide area networks are required to be converted into a government cloud, which is already there. I have called upon the Government of India a couple of years back, and they have certainly acceded to this point. A government cloud is now in the offing, a government application store. Why should every state need to reinvent the wheel? 30 states are reinventing the wheel by developing the same applications and same delivery applications for the people. Because we are in a hurry. Now we have 930 million mobiles are being said. These 930 million mobiles are devices in the hands of a huge population of this country. And there are mobile service delivery gateways being established, has been established at national level. We are all using it. And mobile has become now, even before technology could move fast enough to grab the opportunity, the demand side has, this is one example, John, where demand side has pushed the government and the agencies involved in the development of applications to have no options but to consider mobile service deliveries. And mobile service deliveries are today becoming a major tool in the hands of the people, where the entire experiment of financial inclusion would actually be done through the instrument of mobile as devices. And in the process, devices are converging. Mobile will not be called mobile. I'm very fond of saying that our children, when they'll grow up, they'll say, you know, these people used to talk like this. Actually, they will be talking like this. Nobody will talk like this. Mobiles are converging, devices are all converging, networks would be converging. These current networks would become obsolete in no time to come.
They definitely will evolve.
They would, so evolution is convergence. And applications also need to have technologies which can be delivered more and more efficiently through smaller and smaller devices. And that is where I like to call it the DNA of transformation. Devices, networks, and applications converging to lead to transformation of this billion and the next billion and the next billion. And the demand side is pushing technologies to evolve fast. And that is the challenge before Cisco.
Yes.
On that note, I'll ask Vipul to now give us his views.
Thank you, sir. So we are discussing a topic of good governance and the role of e-governance in good governance. I would not be, I would rather speak on a very generic tone to assess as to what has to be done. I have a couple of arguments. I will not take much time because the lunch time is very near, I guess. And but one of the few things which we need to do is that there is it's a spectrum. The governance is a spectrum, in my opinion. With the current level of governance available and being done at the state level or at the federal level, to the ideal goal of good governance. Now, where do we stand? We need to assess it first. There are many examples. For example, all the state governments are at various stages of rolling out many of the services in e-form. Some of them are lagging, some of them are very far. I was in Hyderabad and we came to know that they have launched 48 citizen-centric services in the e-form. And they used to call it e-seva earlier. But they have now recognized that e-seva is not the right kind of jargon. Me-seva is the correct jargon. And I cannot translate fully what me-seva actually means, but it is a serve you. So even at the as an administrator or as a political executive, most of the state governments are recognizing that e-seva has to translate into something more than that. So they are trying to move up the spectrum towards probably good governance. But if you assess it in a rational manner, then we realize that we are somewhere in the middle of the spectrum and trying to achieve good governance. I'm not talking about inclusive growth as yet. Probably that is a subject which probably may come once we are at a level of good governance, which our citizens perceive is good. Now, if you talk to citizens where these 48 services are rolled out, or to citizens where 8 services are rolled out, they do recognize that this has helped. But then their expectations are much more. That they do not want to apply for 6 different departments, services from the same kiosk 6 times. Now that is a major challenge in my opinion, where e-governance within our system is struggling. The citizen perceives the government as one unit, as one of our panelists earlier said. But do we have the government, cohesive government behind the scenes? After you give an application or a couple of applications for certain services, are we cohesive enough behind the scenes as a government? Which in my opinion is not the case. Government departments work in silos. The internal governance of the government itself is a major challenge, and the department need to be much more cohesive to project themselves as one single unit of the government to the citizens. Now this challenge is probably going to be handled by most of the state governments, and IT enablement would be one of the ways of achieving this. This argument, if we take it further, then we find that, for example, let's take the case of land records. You can get your land records online or maybe even from a kiosk kind of place. But what about land acquisition? When the land acquisition happens, how does that gel with the land mutations? Have we been able to do that kind of exercise? Maybe yes, partially in some of the states, but not fully. Then there is another issue of land registration. In many of the states, land registration is not with the revenue department, and it is done by judicial department, and there is no connection between the two, and they do not talk to each other. And the same paper moves in the traditional manner for the databases which are available to be updated for the land records. Now, there is a need for government departments to have some kind of speaking databases. And this speaking of databases has to happen in an electronic format rather than in a paper format. And that is an internal governance issue of the departments in the governments. Now, this also would ultimately require speaking of databases with databases outside the government. For example, recently we had that LPG cap of LPG cylinders, and you can see that most of the databases for LPG is maintained by oil companies. Now, their databases do not speak to the PDS databases available with the state governments, whereas the subsidies are connected, kerosene subsidy and the LPG subsidy. If you get one, you do not get another. So these databases don't speak automatically. Yeah, exactly. And then you find that even the oil companies are struggling, and the public distribution departments of the state governments are struggling even more. Now, this kind of connection between disparate databases and automatic speaking of these databases is another challenge for achieving a level of e-governance, which can be called probably me-seva or me-governance. And in between the spectrum, we also find there is m-governance and g-governance also coming. Now, this, speaking of databases, is one of the key challenges, I think, which we need to address. And how do we address? Government of India probably thought about one unique ID called Aadhaar. I don't know what is the experience of other people or the industry people about that project, but in my opinion, it is struggling. Then Government of India came up with another unique ID through the National Population Register. It will also take a lot of time for the whole of the country to be put into a database. But in the meantime, my argument is that the state governments at their own level should start putting databases in a speaking mode on an automatic basis to achieve some kind of higher level of spectrum of governance. Inclusive growth or inclusion would automatically come in when we start using disparate databases with the government databases, and it becomes one humongous database or a kind of cloud of databases. So this is my argument, and I would suggest that people who are in the industry, who are in the government, who are in the public sector, would take note of such kind of suggestion or maybe argument and take it.
Thank you, Vipul. I think you pointed towards a very, very important issue, but I think all that piece is on account of the fact that the lunch has already been served. So what would be a utopian position? I can think of countries like Estonia and Moldova, both of which I got a little exposure. Estonia, as a matter of fact, is being cited as a model country. It has, of course, got a population just about a couple of billion people, which will be like Udaipur or
smaller than Udaipur.
now. And yet, like these are Nordic countries, and some of these countries, internet is a fundamental right. Everybody has to be provided with internet. Now, when you talk of 1 billion plus people, when do we reach that level is something we need to think about. But another thing, and I had once the Minister of State of Moldova sitting with me in a panel, like Arvind is sitting now, and I asked her, she said, there are 3 ministers of IT in Moldova, So I said, why do you need 3 ministers of IT in Moldova? So she said, we have a coalition of 3 parties. So every department has 3 ministers. Now, that is in a utopian place. Moldova also is, from the point of e-governance, very advanced. So what I'm talking about is the collaboration on data. How challenging it is, even in countries where you have reached a utopian level otherwise. Now, what do they do in Estonia? There's a gentleman called Ivar Tello. Many of you would have heard him in World IT Forum, which was staged in Delhi. And then we invited him to Gujarat to speak about how Estonia manages. And he's now a person who's a mentor level in e-governance. So he said, we have evolved a system. I said, do you have one common database? In Estonia, the law is that if a person has been asked about his KYC, know your customer, once, legally you cannot ask him second time. It is a crime, it is criminal to seek the same information from an individual second time. So I said, how do you manage? And this is the situation. I'm talking about utopian levels. We should reach this level in India. Why should the same man be called upon to give the same father's name and age and everything n number of times? You do it day in, day out. You go to register yourself for net banking. And with every bank, every credit card, every debit card, you have to give the same information ad nauseam. You keep on giving it. You use autocomplete and you do all those kind of things. What do they do in Estonia? They said, we also have coalition governments. Departments are not prepared to part with their databases. So they have devised what is called X-Road. Now this X-Road actually is a way to go through all the databases. So you have silos of databases of each department, and this X-Road cuts across each of those to create some kind of a common shared information basis on certain parameters of the meager 2.5 million people of that country.
In technical terms, it's called normalizing the database. So you normalize all these databases and you have a common
now,
index.
what do you look forward to in Aadhaar is ASA and AUA, like service agency, and Aadhaar service agency and user agency. Now the biometric database rests with the central government at Delhi, while the remaining data remains with those states. A user agency department sends its data to the service agency in the state. The service agency cleans the data. There is data cleansing which takes place, and then it becomes one unique data. So we are hoping for that. In Gujarat, we have said every application which is developed must be Aadhaar compliant.
So that alone is not going to be enough though. So what you really need is the authorization. See, the Aadhaar focuses, the reason why it's struggling is because it focuses on the authentication part of it. Now authentication alone is not going to do it. You need to have authorization as to what data is going to be used by whom for what purpose. And you need to have accounting that will basically tabulate who accessed what data at what time over a period of time. Now there is no database in the world that can handle this kind of a load, especially when you're talking about 1.2 billion people. That is really the technology challenge.
This is one of the very important arguments that poor Nandan is facing.
Yeah, I know. He's trying to solve it, but you know.
Now, to conclude, I would say we have taken up a mammoth exercise. To connect with 1.2 billion people is not a simple thing. It's a major challenge. When we would have reached even halfway, the targets that we have kept for ourselves, we would have, as a matter of fact, reached some landmark positions globally. There are lots of examples of excellence in India. In state to state, the applications and so many other exercises have a lot of excellence. So I think we should conclude on that note. While there are challenges, while there are major mammoth issues facing the authorities, we are trying to do it for a population, 80% of which is hugely underserved. We have made a good beginning. We have made a good beginning which is going to lead to good governance. And we are certainly, the very consciousness of inclusive growth through e-governance in this country is a hope that we must all try to fulfill from the positions that we are sitting at. Thank you very much for giving your time, and thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Quickly, we would like to express our gratitude to all the speakers who were here. So I would like to request my colleague to come here, and we have to present mementos to our respected chair and the speakers. Can we have the mementos, please? I request Mr. Ravi Saxena to kindly present a memento to Mr. Bipul Pathak, Secretary IT Jammu and Kashmir. Ms. Joan Mukala, Distinguished Fellow, Cisco Systems. Thank you, ma'am, for being part of the session. Major General R. Sivakumar, CEO and Head, NSTI, Government of India. Thank you, sir. And our co-chair, Mr. Arvind Sitaram, President, Inclusive Growth, Cisco, for a wonderful presentation. And I request our co-chair, Mr. Arvind Sitaram, to present the memento to our session chair, Mr. Ravi Saxena. Thank you, sir.